Okay, today's topics, we're going to talk about special functions and sharing information, and also on the subjects of online programming, the operation. I won't be getting involved with it in depth greatly because of the time period, but it's just an overview of what we can do with the launch scan tools regarding online programming. And also I'm going to show you some samples, brief samples of on the online programming on two vehicles. So the questions, if you want questions answered, what we'll do is you're probably better off emailing the questions later to headquarters, and then we can answer it that way because of the number of people on this session. So the first topic is special functions. So what we're going to cover is what are special functions, what functions does the launch scan tool do, and I'll also show you some samples on what two examples of special functions in this meeting. So with special functions are growing over the years and changing. Special functions are just every year and every new model coming out. Basically, the OEM, which is these special functions are developed by the OEM, unique to certain models and makes, and so they're growing every time a model vehicle comes out, and depending upon the technology around it, special functions will be produced. Years ago, special functions used to be just turning on and off activation sensors and so forth, but now they're programs within a program. So it's just not a matter of a special function turning a light off anymore. It's actually doing other functions behind the background that the actual operator doesn't know or the service technician doesn't do. It just makes it service technician very simpler to do the process. And today's special functions are getting more and more complex, and they're getting harder to know what they can do and what they can't do. So these days, launch is growing and growing with the special functions, and it's actually too many to show you today, for instance. So I had to work out a way of showing you how to find the information and what the launch does. Now, special functions is like key programming, injector coding, even down to brake caliper resets, releases in service conditions where you have to change the brake pads for some reason, brake bleeding, so that comes under a special function. And even now there's more and more testing conditions and status of the vehicle's modules in the vehicle that is actually forming under a special function these days. And I'll show you an example later. Also battery sets. So if a battery has to be reset, we have to do a special function depending upon the make and model of that vehicle to tell me if we've changed the battery or we're increasing the capacity of the battery of that vehicle, because it affects the charging rate of that vehicle regarding the battery that's been applied to the vehicle. And that also comes under special functions. And there's many, many more. And so the functions, as I said earlier, are growing, and there's so many for different makes and different models. Now, for an example, a special function is routines. It's basically, these days, it's just not switching on and off sensors. It could be actually a routine. So when you select a special function, you're selecting a routine. Now, the UDS protocol, this is an example where the security access is a special function these days, where you actually have to do this function before you get access to another function. So it opens up the gateway to actually carry out certain functions. And Volkswagen and Audi and so forth are perfect examples of this security system access before you actually do the function. And some purposes like Ford and that, they actually send a seed out to the client, and then the client actually has to then change that seed, which is a code, and send it back to the module, so the actual module will actually unlock itself or open up for that procedure or that function. And Volkswagen's a perfect example for that. So diagnostics also these days are coming under a special function where it's a routine that to do a service reset, you're not just turning the light off, you may have to set other ECUs to tell it that the oil level has been changed, what type of oil has been applied to the vehicle, and so forth. And that comes under a special function. Routine diagnostics, fault coding, automatically monitoring the system is also a routine and all a special function. So programming itself, to access programming on some vehicles, you actually have to carry out a routine or special function to access it, and then you can actually do the programming. So these special functions are growing and becoming more and more important to diagnosing the vehicle. So even down to fault codes, yes, you can read fault codes, but certain functions, to turn those fault codes off, you may have to do a special procedure or function, special function, to go into that area to turn the fault code off, because it resets monitors and so forth. So as I mentioned before, extension diagnostics routines are basically unlocking it. So if I want to adjust something in that vehicle, like Volkswagen, or a sensor needs to be calibrated, I may need to have a special function to unlock it first, which is the access security, and then do the special function itself. The other things that happens in special functions these days is testing of the critical safety components. So these days, even under special functions, the does when you select that function, it does a test on that typical airbag test, or an O2 sensor test, an oxygen sensor test. So these functions are becoming more and more popular and a must. And do we need to do them? Yes, your clients do need to look at the special functions, because if they change the oil in the vehicle or a component in the vehicle, they must make sure that that vehicle doesn't have a special function to reset it. And this could be like the DPF regeneration, injector coating that you may have done already, gear learning. So if a clutch plate has been changed, it may need to relearn the clutch and pressure points of that clutch. As I mentioned, battery resets, oils resets, and SRS, which is your steering wheel angles. And there's many, many more. So I couldn't really discuss them over this session. So what I've done is there's a link. And now most of the scan tools, the PAD3s and the PAD V, which I'm sort of talking about today, has the tested vehicles. And I'm going to show you examples of this area. So when you go into that website, or even onto the tested vehicles in the into the scan tool, you'll have this menu or this link. Yes, it tells you what vehicles it is, but I show customers regarding special functions and what modules that the scan tool can do. So this is what we're talking about. What can the launch scan tool do regarding special functions and its operation? And this is probably the easiest and best way to show the clients what we can do. So for instance, I can go into, I'll go into Honda. So select H, then Honda. This is actually on live on the website, so it may be so. And I can select the systems. So if you wanted to know what, say for instance, the launch will do with the special, the functions on that scan tool, you can look in this area, and this will tell you the systems it can do. But most important, you come down to this area, it will actually give you a manual, and you'll see under here special functions. So once you select special functions, it will actually bring up all the special functions under Honda that the launch will be able to do. So if you have questions regarding what I can do and what I cannot do regarding special functions, you can use this table and show the client, and the client can actually use it on the scan tool. So directly into the scan tool, they can log onto this site or press the tested vehicle area on the scan tool and access this area. But they have to be online. The only difference is it is actually online. It's not built into the scan tool. So you have to be on the internet to access this information. So I'll go back and I'll have a look at another one. So we'll go back and I'll look at, say, for instance, BMW. So you'll see the listings. We'll select BMW. Again, we can see the functions that the systems that the BMW we can access on different makes and models. So you will have to check, you know, what make and model it is. For instance, all the modules are here. But also, if I go down into the function area, I can see the different areas. You know, if I come down to, there's a whole heap of listings on BMW, naturally. We come down to special functions, select that, and then it will actually give me the special functions regarding that module. For some reason, it's a little bit slow. So all the like wastegates, link, and so forth, I can actually see it under that special function. So it's just, you can select the model, make, or module. So you're best to go into a certain air conditioning AC, and then come down. And if it's got a special function in it, you come down to special functions, and the browser will actually list whatever it is. But for instance, this air conditioner doesn't have a special function. So I'll go into another one, say for instance, Mitsubishi. So we go to Mitsubishi. We select special function. And now you can see all the special functions for under the year model, the module, and what you can actually do within the special function. So you can see that carrying out this special function, we may have to do that. We've got other videos, or we will add videos regarding these special functions to do it, because it's unique to that vehicle and it takes a little bit of time. So that gives you an example of that. So next, what I'll do is I'll show you an example on a scan tool regarding a special function. Now this is taken off a 2020 Corolla hybrid, and I've got two examples. Now a special function, as I said, growing. This is actually one just to do the refrigerant gas volume check. So what this special function is doing is checking the air conditioning gas volume, where it never used to be. It used to be empty, or you wouldn't be able to check it. But some of these new cars now, they actually have a special function just to check the air conditioning's okay or not. So for an example, we go into the scan tool, we will select air conditioning, we will select refrigerant gas volume check. Now you will need to follow the instructions. Now, in most of the special functions, there will be conditions that you need to meet. You cannot shortcut it. Now, for instance, this example, I've given you an example that I did not meet any of these conditions at first. So I had the ignition on and air conditioning on, but I didn't go to the temperature. So when I selected OK, it went to check my conditions for 120 seconds, and then it came back to this menu. And everybody thinks that, oh, this function's not working. No, I did not meet the conditions in this area. So you must get the clients to make sure they read the conditions in this pop-up menu. So once I met those conditions, I pressed OK, and then next, it checked the gas level, and mine was okay because it's only a new car. So the gas level was normal. If it was abnormal, it means that the air conditioning would have to be serviced or checked, for an example. So that's actually under a special condition, under a special function. Now, the next example is a diagnostic mode, but it's actually in the navigational system of this Corolla. So again, this is where the special functions are changing, and it's not to do with just the scan tool. So for instance, this example, it needs the scan tool to activate the navigational system, but the actual navigational system give you the information. So for an example on this one, you would select navigational system, read the prompts and making sure that I'm doing the right thing. I want to go into this area. I press OK. I then select special functions. Then I select diagnostic mode. And then I need again to make sure I read the prompts. Again, a lot of people will ring up that the special function is not operating. It's because they haven't met these conditions. So you really do need to take note of these operations. Do not skip through them so quick. So what we'll do is we say, okay. The next thing is to make sure these conditions are right. So I do these conditions, make sure the engine is off, and it calls a transfer. And what this is doing, this special function is sending a transfer information to the navigational system. So the scan tool is sending the request to the navigational system to go into this area. So I press OK. And now it's in diagnostic mode. Now what happens in this point of time is the scan tool doesn't do it anymore. It actually sent the command to the navigational system, and then the navigational system actually reacts from this. Now this is a video of what happens. Get it to operate. Can I operate? Might be a bit slow coming. Just wait for the video to I'm just going to play out the video itself separately. So this is where the navigational system, once the scan tool sends that command, it turns it into the service mode. So now the actual diagnostics and the information are not on the scan tool, but actually on the vehicle itself. But you need the scan tool to go into this mode. So this just gives you an example what some of the special functions are actually doing now. So regarding the special functions, if you want more information regarding this subject, I know it's short, but it's one of the meeting recently did not go for so long. This PPT will be shared, so you'll be able to use this PPT, and these video information, the launch sites actually show videos on the special functions, so you can actually review this after the training. So you feel free to go into this area. I won't play it today, but you can do that later on. So each one will have videos on different subjects. Now, the next subject is online programming. As I said, it's only an introduction of it today because it can be it needs time, you need special conditions, you need the vehicle to be right and so forth. So we can't really do an online demonstration, otherwise it would be too late. But I thought we do it this way, then you can actually review this PPT and show other clients this PPT to demonstrate some of the examples. So on this, on the content, we'll talk a little bit about why we need online programming, the equipment that we require for online programming, because it's very important, the steps that you can consider before programming, because most cars sometimes don't need programming. They may need coding, but not programming. So these steps need to be considered. So that's when we talk about when we do online programming and coding, do we need to do it? So some modules don't need it. Some may only need coding, not reprogramming. So, and we'll talk a little bit about what goes wrong. If something happens while you are programming, what do you need to do? It's quite simple. And I'll give you some brief examples on 2 vehicles regarding performing an online programming steps. Now, the very first thing is, why is launch involved with online programming? It's because the factory OEM, if you've done it before and used other devices and seen it around in the market, it can be very costly. It's a very high subscription cost. It's complex. If you've done it, it's very complex, where you actually have to pay for the program. You actually have to pay for the subscription. You have to download the file to the computer. You then have to transfer the file to another bit of software. Then you can download it into the vehicle. So it can be very, very costly and at a high risk if it fails. And so what we've done with launch, with the PAD3s and Vs, Pad V, we've simplified it. It's portable. It comes directly to the scan tool. It's directly delivered to the scan tool by a file. You're actually in the vehicle at that point of time. So you actually talking to that vehicle. If it needs coding, you can do it there and then, as long as the conditions are met. So we have, and it's a lot simpler. It's downloading the file directly to the unit, to the car, at the time of the technicians doing the diagnosis, long as the conditions are met. Also, the best part, yes, it is free in programming, where you're not paying subscriptions most of the case. And some vehicles are very expensive. One could be $3,000 a year. So it can be very, very expensive. And we have the after-sales service, which that comes back to the technicians, and I'll talk a little bit about that, the engineers, if something goes wrong. Now, it's simple. The online programming and initialization is done by the cloud. The cloud server is doing a lot of the work for you. All you're basically doing is you're connecting it to the vehicle. You're making sure that the data and VIN and ID of that vehicle is read. And then the server will actually then do the work for you and send the file that is needed to do that programming for that module. So it cuts out a lot of problems regarding downloading the file, paying the money and subscription and so forth. So online programming this way is made it so simple if you've used it before or not. So it's basically that. Now, why would we do the online programming and initialization? So these are the steps. So programming is when you probably would replace an ECU, which is a module, or something's happened. It was empty, the EEPROM, there's no program in it. So it's brand new and it doesn't know what to do. So you have to program it. Or you're replacing a second-hand one. Now, in some cases, replacing even a second-hand ECU, you can reprogram it to a newer version software. So it might be an old unit, but the car had a newer program in it. You can actually reflash the program. Okay. Now, once the program's flashed or the firmware's flashed into the ECU, then you would have to code it to suit that vehicle, its requirements, to match the sensors and match the other modules within that vehicle. So that's where coding comes into place. And the last point is initialization. After you do all this, you may have to initialize the ECU by turning the key off or taking it for a drive. And in some cases, some of the modules, like foot modules, you activate the windows up and down or lights on and off, and that initializes the program to make sure it works. So those 3 steps are the steps that you take. So programming, coding, and then initialize is the last point. Some cases, only coding and then initialize may only be needed. The ECU may not need to be flashed, but it need to be coded to the vehicle, then initialized to the vehicle. So these are a little bit of a tip in some ways where you need to do the coding first. If you get a car in or a customer gets a car in, they perform the coding first. If nothing works, then do the programming, then back to coding, and then initialize later. So depending upon the circumstances, most cases the cars may only need coding. But if the coding and the car doesn't work after the initialization, then you may need to program it, code it, then initialize it. So those 3 steps again. Now, precautions. With anything to do with coding and programming, you must be very cautious on the steps because it's critical. If any of these are not met or something happens between the program download area or the programming of the vehicle, you can actually damage, or not damage, but non-recovery. The module can't be reprogrammed again, and then you will have to replace the module. So most cases is because a lot of people don't take a lot of the steps because battery voltages go down. The vehicle is actually running. Some people actually try to do it running in some form. I don't know, to keep the battery charged up. So the very first thing with this, you would make sure that you make sure the engine is shut down and it's stabilized. It's at rest. And usually around 30 seconds, a little bit longer, just to make sure everything's okay. The next step, you would use a battery stabilizer or a mobile maintainer, and it's got to maintain the various voltages around. Normally it's around 13.5 these days. On some of the European vehicles have to be a good steady rate around the 13.5. Now, you would have to then hook up the launch. Say, for instance, the launch produces the PFP 100, or on the trolley kit with the TWT 100, you have a battery maintainer, and that needs to be put on the vehicle well before you either code it or program it, because you need that voltage to be stabilized. Because some vehicles will turn on other accessories to maintain the voltage, like BMW and Mercedes. Some BMWs draw up to 90 amps. They turn on fans, wipers, everything like that during the process. So a battery maintainer or stabilizer, like the PFP 100, needs to be applied to the battery. You ensure that the scan tools are charged up and connected correctly. Now, connecting, we do not use Wi-Fi or Bluetooth. You make sure that you use a USB connection between the connector of the vehicle and the scan tool itself. Because, again, you do not need to interrupt that process while it's doing the flashing or the programming of the vehicle. So it's a very important point. A lot of people keep on using Bluetooth. Coding, sometimes they get away with okay, but if it depends on how long the coding is. But for programming, it's definitely a no. You must make sure that you plug up a cable to make sure those communications are stable. Again, you shut down all the electrical vehicle of components of the vehicle. because if they turn on, the battery voltage could change. So you make sure accessories and so forth are turned off and follow the instructions. And read carefully the prompts. The prompts tell you which step to do and what to turn off and each part of the program in the launch scan tool. So you do make sure you read those prompts carefully. Situations where the coding, why we would code. It's just going back over what I sort of mentioned before. So why would we be code or programming again? Is basically if we change the new ECU, if the first coding of the ECU doesn't work, then you would code after programming. So again, we would program and then code. The majority of the time, you may only need coding. You may need to update the ECU. There might be what we call bugs in these computers or the modules. So we need to update to a newer version, which we can, if it's available. So that's an example. Software has been damaged. Now, in most cases, software can be corrupted because of battery problems, earthing problems of the engine. So again, it's maybe something that we need to look at. We can't fix the problem, but we may be able to reflash it, code it, and then initialize it again. It might come good. In some cases, it can be. And secondhand computers, be wary. Some ECUs can need coding, not when you replace the ECU, but some cannot. Some secondhand computers have time limits on them, how many times it's actually coded, and limitations, or can't be coded or programmed. So they need to be wary of if it can be coded or programmed. So it comes down to that. Some regions have different calibrations. So some countries and where the vehicles are actually sold and bought, some files are different to different areas or regions. So you just need to make sure that that part number, we actually put it under a part number. The version, what you see in the scan tool is a part number. And you just use that part number to confirm that, yes, it's good for this region and that module. And normally you would have to go back to OEM or some sort of information regarding that. Now, if something goes wrong, if something happens between the programming and flashing of the ECU, the very first thing is just tell the customers to remove the battery for 10 minutes and then try again, because it might be corrupt. If you can get into the menu again, into the same step area where you can actually do the programming, you might be able to reflash and reprogramming again. It could be because the battery went flat, something happened. So you can actually reprogram it as long as you can get into the menu. If you cannot get into the menu or something prior, you can't talk to the module ever again, then you may have to replace the module. But normally, if you can get back into the menu, talk to the module after that point of time, then you can go in. If you get stuck, if at that point is not, you cannot go in, can't do anything, what you'll do is you'll send the feedback. And the feedback will be sent to the engineer, and then headquarters will actually then look at that and try and solve your problem regarding what happens. So if there's a problem with the scan tool, the feedback is the most important, and especially with programming, we actually capture the background of that ECU to see what is going on regarding why it did not program. So it's very important to get the customers to get on a regular basis, get on the internet and give the feedback regarding a problem they've had via the scan tool. Or if it's to do with programming, same thing. Now, I mentioned before some precautions and why you need a battery stabilizer or maintainer. It's like Mercedes. When you program a Mercedes, the actual electric cooling fan comes on, flat out. So you may have to disconnect this to maintain the battery voltage. So there's certain things that may need to be done on different vehicles. and the prompts will actually tell you this, but for instance, a Mercedes, to keep the battery stable, you may need to disconnect the main fan. So a battery maintainer is very, very important. The other thing is, after you do the programming, the vehicle is not started, you would have to do the driver authorization system on a Mercedes. And this is simple. It could be just a matter of pulling the key out, let it settle, put the key back in so the code is read through the key, and then the initialization may be passed, and then you can start the car. You may need to remove the key away from the vehicle and then come back. So with the case of Mercedes, that's most of the cases what you'll have to do, is because the driver assist system is come in. After you do the programming, it will not start, but you'll need to do this procedure. BMWs. Now, some BMWs you may be aware of if you've programmed them before or attempted to look at it, and there's a different cable in the car. The F series has a network cable, where the E series do not need the cable. So certain models will require the network cable to be hooked up to that vehicle to program it. And it's because of the age of the vehicle and the programming happening in that present time. But the newer models, most of them now are not using a network cable. It's using the actual connector itself. So be cautious regarding those sort of things. The other thing with BMWs E-Series is the information. Just make sure the information is correct. And you can see on this example, exactly the same part numbers, right? And the flash time is unlimited. Again, with some modules are limited. You only can flash it a number of times, and it might be 5, it might be 8. Depends upon the make and model of the vehicle. If you see unlimited, it means that we can actually reflash it again. So if we reflash it, it's actually going to be the same number again. And it might be because it's a corrupted program, but we can reflash the same number again, the part number that we were talking about. If there's a problem, take a snapshot of this area, and then you can actually give that to the feedback through the feedback system of the scan tool. And again, the feedback I talked about is this. This is the information that's captured in the background for you, and you do the feedback, and then the engineer can actually read to see what went wrong with that particular vehicle at that special time. Again, BMW, you'll have selected areas depending upon the function you're going to do. So for instance, you will go to the central gateway, has been replaced. So you will go into this area to do the programming for this example. So you select the menu. Then what you would do then, once you selected that menu, you would look at the area, and it's important to see the star. This star represents there's a new program or it needs to be updated. So you need to the customer needs to be very cautious to make sure this is correct. Now, in this example, if this CAFD was not included in this section, do not select anything. So for instance, where we are in the CAF module or that area to program, we do not select anything else. We must select the one it ticks. So again, in this area, yes, it is here. It is got a star, so we can select that that part number. If it did not have any stars, do not select anything else. So the star represents the new program, or it can be selected. And you would go next. Now, this is just another example. In case what I just talked about is, again, the star is not there. I would not select any, it's not, no new versions, no part numbers. So you do not select, you could select one of them, but the star is not there, it's not recommended. So it's not there. So you do not select the documents. So you would not select any of these documents because it's not current for this vehicle. This is an example. If I went into a module and selected, I went into the ESP, EPS, electric power steering, and the star is selected this version software, I would then select this one. That's the one I would select to do the coding. But if in case there was no star here, I would then select the new one, new version, for instance, because it's the same part number, but a different number. So you can see they are different, same part number, but a different version. You would select the highest number and use that program. There's a star here, that's why. Yeah. Okay, so you just read the prompts and follow the instructions. But in most cases, it will select, the star will select the version that you need to update. So after the programming, you must need to clear the codes. So anything to do with the programming and coding, most cases there will be codes in all the other modules. So, and a special function may need to be done. So after you do the programming, then you may need to look up the special function and then carry that out. It may be to relearn the parameters back to base or something like that, sort of special function. Okay. It's telling the car that it's new program, it's new coding, you need to start from the beginning, and then the special function does that function for you, adjusts it back to the base of the program. And when a FRM, which is a footwell module in a BMW, you need to initialize it. You may actually I said earlier, the power windows need to be activated. So you need to actually turn on things if it's required. So the initialization is simply just turning things on and off sometimes to make sure they do work and make sure there is no codes. So this is after the programming and coding has been performed. A second-hand ECU in a Mercedes. So again, you go through a second-hand one, you can actually program it, but each of these modules have a different procedure. So again, the client needs to read the prompts and be wary of what they're doing of each of the modules, because they are a little bit different to the different models. So they just take their time. And most cases, a second-hand module, the anti-theft system has to be cleared. Most of the Mercedes second-hand modules, they've got to be virginized. So basically, they've got to set at a 0 access to security. Otherwise, if they're not set to 0, they cannot be programmed. So again, if somebody gives a second-hand module in and it hasn't been versionized or cleared, it may not be able to be programmed. The ABS unit is simple on a second-hand one. You just change the VIN number. You program the VIN number and then that module would operate. So an airbag system, again, it may need to be what we call unlocking. And that's what I said about the anti-theft system. It needs to be unlocked first. And then once you've done that, then you can write the VIN number and then it can be programmed in. But again, this unlocking needs to be done first. So the CAS system, the anti-theft data is important. It needs to be cleared. And then finally, the coding of second-hand has no data. Okay, so it contains no data. That's what it means. It needs to be cleared from the older vehicle it came from. So we're talking about a second-hand ECU, which can be the hardest, but it can be done. So how you tell second-hand? You go into the program area in the data stream and you'll see no, no, no will happen. So that's telling me that this has been cleared and it's ready to go. So if you see yes in any of these, you cannot program it. So these need to be cleared first to know. The other point down the bottom is if when you're in that programming area, it'll give you the part number and so forth, and it'll say no new control software has been found, whether we have not got the file. So don't do anything. Don't add a file that's not there. So again, you can't program a file and it's incorrect for that vehicle. So be very cautious. Now, some examples. This is what I mentioned before. I'm going to just show you a couple of little examples going through the scan tool. It's through a PPT naturally, but they're not live. And these are just examples between the BMW and the Mercedes for future references. So you can use this PPT for your other clients, for your own training. So the very first one is going to be the BMW. I made a mistake. It's actually an X6, an E71, but it's to replace the footwell module, which is the FRM, and we're going to program it. So these are the steps to do the programming. So the very first thing is you need to make sure that you hook up the USB. Got a bit of background noise, I can't. Okay, so the very first thing would be the USB cable have to be hooked up. Then you choose the programming, the online programming. Then you would confirm the module and chassis. These are the steps I'm going to show you next. You're going to do programming. You confirm the engine, so it keeps on checking you at all these steps. So you follow these steps. Choose the system. You have to unmute everybody, that's all. Tal, can you unmute? So regarding the steps, we'll follow these steps now, and each step, what we're going to show you, downloading to the server, starting the program, and then you finish the program. So these are the steps that you would carry out to do the online programming and the coding. Now we're going to do the footwell. If the footwell module on a BMW is it's damaged easily because of battery voltages and so forth. So when you do this, you need to tell the customers this is the causes of it, and what we're going to do is what the solution would be. So we're going to write the coding of the new footwell module and replace it, and program it with and code it with the new one. So the footwell module's been damaged because of unstable battery or faulty battery for some reason. The lights have been abnormal, so this is why we would replace the FRM module. So this is the process what we would do. So the very first thing we would enter into the scan tool, we will select local diagnostics, and again, make sure the battery voltage is stable by using the maintainer. The scan tool is online and the account needs to be logged in. So the scan tool needs to be onto the internet and then logged in. The next thing we'll select is BMW. And we get to select coding and programming. select the X series. We would select the model, which is the X6 E71. We select coding and program. We confirm that this is the right model to make sure you are in the right area. Then we select, we're not going to replace it. This is just an example, but we're going to select that menu. And then we confirm the information from that module or that vehicle. And you can see the status, the programs are actually the same. The part number is the same in this case. So we select yes, that's okay. Then we go to program. We make sure everything again is stable. So again, we reassure that you hooked up the USB between the connector and the scan tool, and make sure for the speed of the program, and it's very, very stable. We don't use Bluetooth in this case. So depending upon the model, the V is hooked up this way, and the pad 3 will be hooked up this way with the data cable if it's F series chassis. But they're slightly different. But again, they're done by cable. We will then select the footwell module. We confirm the information from the footwell, and you can see the hardware are the same in this case. So what we're doing is we're redoing it over again. We're going to flash the same program, basically, or update it. So we select that. We download the program, confirm. Now, this is where, again, we confirm the menus and make sure that the menus are read correctly and the procedures and conditions are met. So make sure you use a battery stabilizer to maintain this battery voltage and make sure these conditions are met. These are very critical in that way. Now you can see in this example, we're actually flashing the same program. So we're going to the same part number to the same part number. So we're just reflashing the old program over because there may have been a problem. This is just an example. So download, the file is getting downloaded, and you wait till this is completed. Do not interrupt anything from this point. You would then select that, and then the flashing is completed. So again, make sure it gets to 100% in the time period. Once it's completed, then it'll go to the next menu and tell you that it's done. So what we've done is we're reflashed the same software again. In this case, this example, it wasn't a new version. So you press OK. And now, do you want to code it? So after we've flashed the computer, then we would want to code it to suit that vehicle and accessories and so forth, its functions. We select yes. And then it's coded straight away. So what we've done is we've actually copied the old coding from the unit, and then we've programmed, flashed it, and then we brought the coding back to that unit again for that vehicle. So that's one example of what we've done in that point. So you press OK. So the next example is a Mercedes gearbox programming steps. So again, you would make sure the connections are made by USB. We're going to choose the online programming. We'll confirm the module and chassis, and then we'll do the coding and programming of that chassis. The model, again, which is going to be, it's module, it's actually the gearbox we're going to select. Then we select the programming process. We download the file from the server or from the other module. It might be an old module. We start the programming, and then we code it with the variance codes, again, unique to this vehicle. So depending upon what the circumstances is, you might be putting a new module in this gearbox, but the program and coding has to be exactly the same of the old one, okay, of the old module. And then on Mercedes, you will need the SCN number. Some cases, if the vehicle doesn't start up or requires you to access it. And again, we do that through the coding and programming of the scan tool. It's built in from the server. And after you program and code it, you will then initialize it by special functions. Again, you would check the special functions to make sure that there's nothing that you need to do regarding the gearbox. There might be a relearn of the gear changes because the vehicle's old. You're putting a new module in an older vehicle. You may need to do a special learn function of that new module in that gearbox for that old vehicle. So the steps will be on the scan tool is we will select local diagnostics. Again, I'm warning you here on this PPT, battery voltage is very critical, online, and your account has to be logged in. You would select the Mercedes. You will then select the control module programming. Then you confirm the VIN number is correct. If it's no, you're going to have to then write the VIN number in. You can rewrite the VIN number back in. But we would select yes, because we're in that vehicle. The VIN number is correct. We confirm. We're talking to the VIN code. Next, we select the transmission because we are doing a sample of the transmission. We would then select control unit programming. Then we would follow the steps. Again, making sure our connections are good. Also, a battery stabilizer really should be in this onto this battery also. So again, those 3 steps need to be confirmed. Make sure the client is aware of the disclaimer. Then you press OK. Now, example, this pops up onto the scan tool. Again, we prompt you. And for this example, it's only when you replace this part number or this part number of the Mercedes. And if you want to know that part number, that is a Mercedes part number. And there's the module and part number that you've been replacing. Most cases, the whole lot, but some cases it may be only the main ECU that's been replaced. But this is the part number that we actually are talking about. And what we're doing is replacing this to a new one. So what we're doing, again, we're going back, we're replacing this. You follow the instructions, you disconnect the old one. And what we're doing first is we're going to read the new unit first. We disconnect it, and then we actually put the old unit back on. So you just follow these steps. So follow each step, press OK, turn the ignition off. And now it tells you to remove the old unit, or the new unit, and install the old one. So what we've done is we've read the new unit. We're going to read the old unit now, and we're going to get the data off the old unit, if it's possible. Most cases it can be done. So we press that, we turn the ignition on, we turn the ignition off. So it's actually read the data. Now we replace the old unit and put the new unit back on it. Now with Mercedes, most cases, I'll go back to the this picture, it's this connector. All you're doing is disconnecting this connector from the old to the new. So we follow the steps again. I'll just go back to where it was. We install the new one, turn the ignition on, and then you'll see this appear. And this represents the part number, which is actually usually on the unit itself. And you can see the digits, it might change slightly. So it's read the difference between the two. And next thing it's going to do is going to download the file if it's required from the server. or from the module itself that we've stored. So for instance, we've read the data, we're holding it, and now we're going to download it back into that module. So we download it straight away. So it didn't go to the server, it held it into the scan tool, and what we're doing is we're dumping the old program back into the new module because the new module is empty, it has no program. We confirm it, and then you'll see this appear. So what we do is we check the part numbers and confirm and read the documents themselves. So just make sure it compares the new unit to the old unit and so forth. So we go to the next step, press OK. And you think this is a big process, but if you do the factory one and that, it's a bigger process. So yeah. So again, read the document, read the prompts, press OK. And then what we're doing is we're flashing the ECU. So we actually wait until it gets to 100%. Do not interrupt this. So again, the bottom area is most important. We call it battery charger, but you would use the FPF 100, the maintainer, make sure that these conditions are met, and wait until the arrow, and this is at 100%. Once that's completed, then it's flashed. It can't be interrupted. So once it's done, it's completed, you press OK, you turn the ignition off, turn it back on, and then the next step is coding. So we would go OK, and if there's an error, this comes up, you'll need to do the SCN coding function. So if this comes up, you will have to go to another area on the scan tool and do this coding, because the flashing and programming is done, but you need this to be completed. So you press OK, and then what we do is we go, instead of this module we were before, we will go in the SCN number, right? That's what it is, the calibration number. We select that, making sure the battery again is maintained. And then if you need a file from launch, it will actually download it from the server. So this is where it's downloaded. Once it's downloaded and completed, press OK, and then follow the steps. Wait a second, then you would end it, turn the ignition off, wait 9 seconds and then end it. Wait, and then turn the ignition on. And then once you've done that, everything's completed, you would then check everything regarding fault codes, and then you would test drive the vehicle once the vehicle started. So this is where the initialization coming. Mercedes, normally you would have to remove the key or perform the driving authorization procedures, and normally it's to make sure that the key's been pulled out in, and then security's passed, and then it allows you to start the vehicle, and then you can do a test drive. So that's the two samples on this meeting. I said the meeting's not going to be too very long because we're going to share this PPT. Now, regarding information, these are some links for information regarding the YouTube, which launches YouTube videos. Facebook has also got the links, and so you can go to those areas. Now, regarding the coverage of online programming, I was going to show you this regarding, if I can bring it up. Online programming, the vehicle listing, it'll be shared with the information that we're going to share with you. It will have the listing of it. But this also, I've got it on this site, that these are the listings of vehicles that we do the online programming. So, for example, Nissan, if you select Nissan and select vehicle coverage, This is the coverage for the online programming for Nissan. So you can actually see the models and what we cover with online programming regarding Nissan. Also, I'll give you another example. There's also Lamborghini. We do some of the online program for Lamborghini. So again, it shares the same as the Volkswagen and Bentley and Lamborghini, and all the list is there regarding online programming. So if you wanted to see if we could do online programming, we'll actually have it all listed here and for the vehicle coverage itself. So that's also will be shared with the information on the shared site itself. I will put that in the chat area, the link, if you wanted to download it. So that comes to the end of this quick chat, or chat in some ways, or this training session. If you've got any questions, it's probably best to email headquarters, and then they can forward the information that you require. And also, this information will be shared as a package, so it'll give you an examples of where you can get the information. We also I've got a link that we will share, a document here. This document will come with the links that you can use regarding information that I've used for this training. So if, and that's the end of the meeting. So thank you very much for attending. But if you've got any questions, it's because of the number of people on the meeting, we'll answer it by just sending an email or a chat to to the people and for headquarters, and then we'll answer back that way and trying to give you more information. So thank you.